erased. Oops. Uh-oh. Their efforts were nixed by its leadership. That's from documents that have been seen by the British newspaper The Guardian. The officials inside the Inspector General's office.
This whole time I'm thinking I'm already live and shit. Alright, start this shit from the motherfucking top.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, some news of Inspectors General. Specifically the ones at the Department of Homeland Security. Feels so warm and fuzzy just to hear that name, doesn't it? The Inspector General's office there tried to alert Congress in April of this year that Secret Service texts from the time of the January 6th thing had been erased. Oops. Uh-oh. Their efforts were nixed by its leadership. That's from documents that have been seen by the British newspaper The Guardian. The officials inside the Inspector General's office prepared a memo that detailed how the Secret Service was resisting the oversight body's review into that date and delayed it about the lost texts after the memo was emailed to the Chief of Staff of the Inspector General. Its contents, according to The Guardian, were never seen again. Ooh. And the disclosure about the erased text messages was never included in Inspector General Joseph Kufari's semi-annual report to Congress about oversight work. The revelation shows the Secret Service only admitted the texts from January 6th were lost months after they were requested by the Inspector General's office, and that Inspector General, Joseph Kufari, might have violated federal law in not reporting the matter in his report to Congress. Might have violated federal law. Who hasn't done that? Apparently nobody these days. The memo was obtained by the Project on Government Oversight. The Inspector General Act of 1978 required Kufari to report significantly delayed access to information. The circumstances around the erasure of the Secret Service texts have been central to the congressional investigation by the House January 6th committee. Remember them? They were in the news until this week. The memo issue says, quote, Secret Service has resisted the Office of Inspector General's oversight activities and continued to significantly delay OIG's, Inspector General's, access to records, impeding the progress of the January 6th review. Secret Service interviewees, said the memo, regularly indicated they would not provide documents to the Inspector General's office unless they first went through an internal review. That's a move potentially in violation of the Inspector General Act. Who hasn't violated? The memo also noted that on multiple occasions when the Secret Service produced documents months after they were requested, they also contained redactions. Secret Service didn't indicate who approved or implied the redactions or why they were made. Well, that's why they're called the Secret Service, duh. Finally, career officials inside the Inspector General's office wrote, the Secret Service claimed they could not access crucial texts from January 6th because of a phone system migration in April of 2021 that wiped all data from the devices of Secret Service agents. These phone migrations are turning out to be mighty convenient. Hello, welcome to the show. And now, ladies and gentlemen, a little thing we like to call News of the Warm, won't you? listen to the war. We can listen to the war. I can hear it now. Well, this seems to fit. This seems to close a circle. What's one of the greatest sources of methane, which is one of the chief causes of warming climate? Landfills. I say landfills are releasing large amounts of planet-warming methane gas into the atmosphere from the decomposition of waste. Well, why don't we just put it there and They are a significant contributor to such emissions in urban areas, particularly. According to a new study, scientists use satellite data from Delhi and Mumbai in India, Lahore in Pakistan, and Buenos Aires in Argentina, identified specific locations in each city that persistently emit high methane levels. Guess what? All of them were landfills. The city's overall methane emissions were from all sources were from 1.5 to 2.5 times higher than previous estimates. So those damn previous estimates. The study, published in Science Advances, is aimed at helping local governments carry out targeted efforts to limit global warming by pinpointing specific sites of major concern. When organic waste like food, wood, or paper decomposes, it emits methane into the air. And we were blaming cows until just recently. Landfills are the third largest source of methane emissions globally, after oil and gas systems. Wells or installations where we're pumping out natural gas, they leak a lot, and they leak methane a lot. And agriculture, there are your cows right there. Although methane only accounts for about 11% of greenhouse gas emissions and lasts about a dozen years in the air, it traps 80 times more heat in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide does. At least 25% of today's warming is driven by methane from you and me, us humans. Let's hold hands and emit some methane, shall we? This is the first time that high-resolution satellite images have been used to observe landfills and calculate their methane emissions, says the lead author of the study. He's from the Netherlands Institute for Space Research. Yes, they don't have enough space in the Netherlands. No, of course they don't. We found that these landfills, which are relatively small compared to city sizes, are responsible for a large fraction of total emissions from a given area, he says. So, why don't we dump that stuff somewhere else? Okay, let's work on that. The birds no longer sing, and the herbs no longer grow. Fish no longer swim in rivers that have turned a murky brown. The animals do not roam, and the cows are sometimes found dead. The people in this northern Myanmar forest have lost a way of life that goes back generations. And it's not scaring the Muslims out of the country. But if they complain, they face the threat of death. This forest, according to the Associated Press, is the source of several key metallic elements known as rare earths. Rare earths now reach into the lives of almost everyone on the planet. We don't need them. They turn up in everything from hard drives and cell phones to elevators and trains. Especially vital to the fast-growing field of green energy, feeding wind turbines and electric car engines. And up in the supply chains of some of the most prominent companies in the world, your GM, your Volkswagen, your Mercedes, your Tesla, your Apple. But an AP investigation has found that their universal use hides a dirty open secret in the industry. Their cost is environmental destruction, the theft of land from villagers, and the funneling of money to brutal militias, like one linked to Myanmar's secretive military government. As demand soars for rare earths along with green energy, the abuses are likely to grow. This rapid push to build out mining capacity of rare earths they get mined is being justified in the name of climate change, according to Julie Michelle Klinger, author of the book Rare Earth Frontiers. She's leading a federal project to trace illicit energy minerals. There's still this push, she says, to find the right place to mine them, which is a place that is out of sight and out of mind, unquote. The AP investigation drew on dozens of interviews, customs data, corporate records, and Chinese academic papers, along with our old friend satellite imagery, and geological analysis gathered by the environmental nonprofit Global Witness. About a third of the companies responded. Of those, about two-thirds didn't or wouldn't comment on their sourcing, including Volkswagen. Nearly all of the companies said they took environmental protection and human rights seriously. Some companies said they audited their rare earth supply chains, others didn't, or required only self-assessments from suppliers. GM said it would, it did understand the risks of heavy rare earths metals and would source from an American supplier soon. Tesla didn't respond to repeated requests for comment. Of course, they don't have a public relations department anymore, so only Elon would respond. And is he on Mars yet? And Mercedes said they contacted suppliers to learn more in response to the inquiry from the Associated Press. Apple says a majority of their rare earths are recycled. They found no evidence of any from Myanmar. There's no way to make sure. The State Department of the United States leads work on securing the U.S. rare earth supply, didn't respond to repeated requests for comment. Experts say the government weighs the regulation of rare earths against other green goals, such as the sales and use of electric vehicles. With ongoing negotiations in Congress, the issue has become increasingly touchy. Rare earths are also omitted from the European Union's regulation on conflict materials. So companies have quietly continued shipping rare earths without environmental, social, and governance audits. What would be the result if now the world would say we want to do such audits on all rare earths production? Said Thomas Krummer, director of Ginger International Trade and Investment, which does mineral and metal supply chain management. The result would be that 70% of production would be closed down. So it's a dirty industry we need to go clean. The story of rare earths is one of a naked grab for resources, says the AP, while driving the wreckage to other countries. These elements are relatively common, despite their name, in trace amounts on the Earth's crust, possess an extraordinary magnetic power critical to technology, but extracting enough rare earths requires intense mining that can be environmentally destructive. The United States offshored its rare earths mining to China in the 1980s because of environmental and cost issues. China's leader at the time declared rare earths China's answer to oil in the Middle East. Tens of thousands of Chinese in the countryside discovered they could make more in a month of mining than years of farming. For decades, the industry prospered. China became the world's foremost miner of rare earths. A Beijing magazine called the profits more addictive than drugs, it did. Then, stung by public criticism, officials in Beijing declared war on the country's dirty industries, including rare earths mining. The demand for rare earths is expected to, this is the AP's word, explode by 300 to 700% within less than 20 years. That's according to the International Energy Agency. And, of course, the recently passed Inflation Reduction Act, seen as a victory for the Biden administration, seen at least by the Biden administration as a victory, that act would increase demand for rare earths even more by subsidizing the sale of electric vehicles in one of the world's largest markets. See how all this works together? The disturbing reality is that the cash that fuels these abuses, like driving people in Myanmar off their land, ultimately comes from the world's fast-growing demand for these minerals, driven by the scaling up of green energy technologies, says a senior researcher at Global Witness, which conducted fieldwork in Myanmar. The United States has called its dependence on rare earths from China a national security risk. There's probably papers about that in Donald Trump's basement right now. As mines in China shuttered, ore prices rose in neighboring Myanmar, home to some of the world's richest deposits of what are known as heavy rare earths. Thousands of miners streamed across the border. It reminds me of the European colonial attitudes towards Africa, said an industry analyst. To avoid damaging ties with the Chinese government, he stays anonymous. You just can't be relying on third world type mining practices in a dictatorship like Myanmar, he says. It's not sustainable. And deadline Sao Paulo. Deforestation in Brazil's Amazon rainforest reached a record high for the first 7 months of this year, preliminary government data showed, as the region approaches the traditional peak of the annual burning season. Happy burning season, everybody. Yeah, Brazil's doing real fine at the whole thing. Government satellite data showed 2,000 square miles cleared in the region from January to July. That's up 7% from the same period last year. So we're improving the rate of burning in Brazil. That's equal to an area 7 times the size of New York City. Why don't we just burn New York instead and say, sorry, New York, just kidding. It was the heaviest deforestation for the period since tracking began in 2015, according to the National Space Research Agency in Brazil, which collects the data. Environmentalists and experts blame President Bolsonaro for rolling back environmental protections, opening room for ranchers and loggers to illegally clear more of the Amazon. Of course, they don't pay him any money for that or anything.
Hey, y'all, I'm
gonna
pause this, and I'm going to be right back in like 5 minutes. That's way too dark. Hold on a second, y'all. Oh shit, that's not as bright as it go. A lot of the times, like, the brighter this shit is, fucking it introduces a lot of noise. They call noise into the image. Alright, so back to it. I'm gonna take it back in like 30 or 40 seconds so y'all can catch back up.
Sorry, New York, just kidding. It was the heaviest deforestation for the period since tracking began in 2015, according to the National Space Research Agency in Brazil, which collects the data. Environmentalists and experts blame President Bolsonaro for rolling back environmental protections, opening room for ranchers and loggers to illegally clear more of the Amazon. Of course, they don't pay him any money for that or anything. New research on Antarctica, including the first map of iceberg calving, doubles the previous estimates of loss from ice shelves and details how the continent of Antarctica is changing. The greatest uncertainty in forecasting global sea level rise is how Antarctica ice loss will accelerate as the climate warms. 2 studies published this week and led by researchers from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory right over there in Pasadena reveal unexpected new data about how the Antarctic ice sheet has been losing mass in recent decades. One study, published in the journal Nature, maps how iceberg calving The breaking off of ice from a glacier has changed the Antarctic coastline over the last 25 years. Researchers found that the edge of the ice sheet has been shedding icebergs faster than the ice can be replaced. This is a surprise finding, apparently. It doubles previous estimates of ice loss from Antarctic's floating ice shelves since 1997.
Hey, can you all
from
hear
6 trillion to 12 trillion metric tons. Ice loss.
I don't know why I'm trying to talk over this shit. Can you all hear it fine on that end?
Has weakened the ice shelves, allowed Antarctic glaciers to flow more rapidly to the ocean, accelerating the rate of global sea level rise. And the other study, published elsewhere, shows in unprecedented detail how the thinning of Antarctic ice as ocean water melts it has spread from the continent's outward edges into its interior, almost doubling in the western parts of the ice sheet over the past decade. Combined, the complementary reports give the most complete view yet of how the frozen continent is changing, losing its ice. Here's the one, ladies and gentlemen. It's copyrighted somewhere. But now some good news. During the first lockdown of the coronavirus pandemic, soot concentrations in the atmosphere over Western and Southern Europe fell by almost half. This is apparent from the comparison of two measurement campaigns carried out by a German research aircraft called HALO in 2017 and 2020. A new study suggests that around 40% of the reduction can be attributed to a decrease in anthropogenic emissions. That's stuff that we do. We humans, let's all join hands and reduce our emissions, shall we? These findings reflect the major impact of human activity on air quality and the significance of soot as an important air pollutant and climate driver in the Anthropocene. That's our era right now. This, according to researchers from the Max Planck Institute for Chemistry and the German Aerospace Center at Leipzig University, among others, published in a specialist journal, Atmospheric Chemistry and Physics. I read it for the title. The research shows a significant improvement in air quality as a result of the pandemic. The amount of soot in the lower troposphere, ladies and gentlemen, of southern and western Europe, dropped by 41%. This was verified with the aid of traffic data and information about fuel consumption during the lockdown periods. This drop is attributed to two main factors: ongoing efforts to reduce soot emissions in Germany and Europe, as well as limited travel as a result of the lockdowns, which of course increased depression and other things. But soot is harmful to health and contributes to global warming. So, which would you rather have, the soot or the depression? And speaking of driving, the latest version of Tesla's full self-driving autopilot has a little bit of a problem. Yeah, it's a wee one. It doesn't appear to notice child-sized objects in its path. Well, send the kids to Mars. Tests performed by the Dawn project using a Tesla Model 3 equipped with full self-driving version, the latest one. Vehicle was given 120 yards of straight track between two rows of cones with a child-sized mannequin at the end. The group, the Dawn Project, says the test driver's hands were never on the wheel. Tesla says that autopilot is not a fully autonomous system, despite the name. I get the joke, Elon. The autopilot provides assistance and cruise control functionality to the driver. Driving at approximately 25 miles per hour, the Tesla hit the dummy each time. The Dawn Project said 100 yards of distance is more than enough for a human driver to notice a child. Tesla's full self-driving software says the Dawn Project fails this simple and safety-critical test repeatedly with potentially deadly results. The Dawn Project's stated goal is, quote, making computers safe for humanity, unquote. It's a small sample size in this particular study, But not the first little bug to be found in autopilot. Last year, Tesla rolled back full self-driving software releases after software bugs were discovered. Bugs. They caused troubles with left turns. Tesla is still working on that. Turns out they've realized left turns are kind of common. And another study of Tesla comes from the U.S. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA. They've upgraded a probe of Tesla Autopilot after it found reasons to look into whether autopilot and associated Tesla systems may exacerbate human factors or behavioral safety risks. The investigation is ongoing. And the California Department of Motor Vehicles has filed complaints against Tesla alleging misrepresented claims the vehicles can drive autonomously. If Tesla doesn't respond by the end of this week, that would be last week now, the case will be settled by default and could lead to the automaker losing its license to sell cars in California. So we'll be looking to see what happened maybe over the weekend. Ladies and gentlemen, this is about a year since the end of America's longest war. And the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, whose reports this show has featured, John Sopko, now says, we need to open up that ugly history book called The 20 Years in Afghanistan and see why we failed. Reuters look back at all this, says as the United States was preparing to leave Afghanistan, officials across the government steeled themselves for intense public scrutiny into how America's longest war ended in shambles, with the Taliban taking power once again. That scrutiny has been absent. The Biden administration portrays the pullout from Afghanistan and extraction operation, one of the largest airlifts ever, as an extraordinary success that wound up an endless conflict that killed more than 3,500 Americans and foreign troops and hundreds of thousands of Afghans. The evacuation ferried more than 124,000 Americans and Afghans to safety over 15 days. Tens of thousands of Afghans, many of whom worked for the U.S., have now resettled in the United States. Biden was left a mess by his predecessor, who committed to completing the troop pullout by May of 2021 without processing a massive backlog of visa applications from Afghans who worked for the U.S. government. We inherited a deadline, but not a plan for withdrawal, said a National Security Council spokesperson. But some U.S. officials, experts, and private evacuation organizers say the Biden administration has avoided taking responsibility for misreading the speed of the Taliban advance. The U.S. military and State Department have been preparing so-called after-action reviews on their roles in the withdrawal, but it's unclear if their reports will ever be made public. Two U.S. officials say that Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin sent back the military's initial after-action review because he was dissatisfied with the limited insight it provided. The report is now complete. Austin is reviewing it. State Department spokesman could not say when or in what form it would release its report. We're going to have to take a black eye on our performance over the past years, said another official, staying anonymous because he's no dummy. The Pentagon chief, after an Air Force Inspector General investigation, concluded in December that no U.S. military personnel would be held accountable for a drone strike in Kabul that killed 10 civilians, including 7 children, in the final days of the evacuation. Pentagon says it'll compensate the family and relocate them, but nearly a year has passed without either of those happening. U.S. officials say there has been progress. A congressional commission approved by the President, Biden, to study the history of the U.S. intervention and the pullout, America's longest war. It's not yet begun its work. Why? Because Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has not named a Republican co-chair. Something he does a lot, if I recall correctly.
I gotta skip that. Hold on for a second.
And, of course, the big news this week almost wiped everything else off the front page, the way the big news always does. One thought at a time, ladies and gentlemen. The story, of course, was the carrying out of a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago, the Florida home of the former president, the world's sorest loser. FBI agents went in there 10 o'clock in the morning. They didn't wake anybody up. And walked away with some documents. Presumably, we don't really know what they are yet, but what they were looking for were documents that belong to the National Archives, presidential records that, in violation of the Presidential Records Act, were not handed over to the archives when the Trump operation skedaddled out of D.C. And the week has been full of speculation. Of course, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, finally deigned to give a public statement against his better judgment. But he didn't say very much, so his better judgment, I guess, won. But there was a flurry of Republican support for Trump in the early hours and days after the FBI operation, which he called a raid, among the other derogatory terms he applied to it and them. Then, as the days went on and more information came out about what was located and what was being searched for, search warrant became public. The Republican support chorus just turned the volume down just a little bit. There are, of course, more questions than answers in this story up right now. First of all, what exactly were these documents? The word nuclear has been bandied about a bit, and certain terms indicating a high level of classification have also been bandied about a bit. But we don't really know much yet about these documents, what's in them. We don't really know why Trump removed them from the White House system, which would have turned them over automatically to the National Archives as his term ended. And we don't know why, over a long period of time, we're now learning that he and his operation and the Justice Department have been discussing these documents and turning over a few of them at a time, but still leaving plenty of them in a padlocked room, basement room, at Mar-a-Lago to this date, to this week, when the FBI came and took them. Why was Donald Trump holding on to these documents? A lot of speculation. Of course, bolstered by the fact that the search warrant said on its face that it was being served to investigate possible violations of the Espionage Act. Now, there are people who have been put in jail for violating the Espionage Act for having one piece of paper out of place. So what was Trump's plan? This videotape just arriving here at Le Show might help us to understand. The magnificent basement of the even more magnificent Mar-a-Lago estate. Even I'm impressed, and I own it. Hi, I'm the 45th President of the United States, and this is where some of the most important documents of my presidency are kept under lock and sometimes even key. Until now, you'd have to be a relative or an international business partner of mine to even see a list of these documents. But now, thanks to a horrible seizure, not mine, I'm fine, many parts of this invaluable collection can be yours for a price that even I think is way too low. Welcome to the Trump Collection. From not even secret to more secret than even I know about, it's all here. Letters to world leaders, weapons codes, confidential commentaries about female officials, reprinted directly from the originals and printed on 100% extra nice paper just for you. Frame a Trump document to fancy up any room. Use them as placemats for a super swell dinner party, or place them where you do your regular reading. Take it from me, the Trump docs turn every home into a little Smithsonian. In the recent past, you'd have to be a world leader paying six figures to have access to this one-of-a-kind collection. But now, thanks to legal proceedings we're still challenging, you could own a page from the Trump collection for as little as $100 a month. But this special offer won't last forever. If you don't believe me, just ask the judge. We'll send you the complete list of what's in the Trump collection, and with your online order, we'll rush you by return postal delivery your piece of the greatest period of American history since the 2016 election. So rush your request for the Trump collection list before midnight tonight, and you'll be enjoying your souvenir of greatness before the grand jury is even seated. And if anyone asks, tell them I sent you. Don't worry if I deny it. That's for your protection. So act now. Like he said, act now. People are standing by. And now, news of our friend the Atom.
Clean, safe, too cheap to meter. Safe, cheap, too cheap to meter. Cheap, safe, too safe to meter. Safe, too safe to meter.
Well, this is proving that some people really aren't paying attention. U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission is set to approve the country's first ever small modular reactor design, your SMR, setting up a potential expansion of small-scale nuclear power stations across the country. Certification was given to the company called NuScale for its SMRs, 76 feet tall, 15 feet wide, pressurized water reactors that can operate in groups of your 4, your 6, your 12, and use passive processes to heat water and move it through the reactor stages. Produces, each one, 50 megawatts of power. They're able to be assembled at the factory before being shipped to their final destination. Once on site, the reactors are installed below ground level in a pool that serves as their primary heat sink. NRC certification means the design meets the agency's applicable safety requirements, according to the NRC. This is only the 7th reactor design to be certified for use in the United States. It was originally submitted to the NRC in 2016. Late last year, when it was said it was approaching commercialization, NuScale gave a name to its power plants, Voyager without the A and without the E, but with the O. One vowel, if you're keeping track. Company is working on several U.S.-based projects. One slated for completion in 2029 at the U.S. Department of Energy's Idaho National Lab, dubbed the Carbon-Free Power Project. The new facility will be located near Idaho Falls and will use 6 of the SMRs. So that's the good news. And here's the rest of the news. According to the Register, the British tech journal, concerns remain over SMR's feasibility because of the amount of waste they produce. A study released in June found that SMRs produce 35 times more waste than their larger predecessors, with much of it in long-lived equivalent waste and low and intermediate level waste. The study also found, if that's not enough, that the waste generated by SMRs is more reactive, making it a more dangerous substance to store. It may be the very nature of their design that makes them less safe. Reactive fuels and coolants are needed to catch stray neutrons that would normally be stopped by the walls of larger reactors. Those fuels and coolants become hazardous waste as well. All right then. Future looking brighter all the time. And so is the present. The situation at Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has deteriorated rapidly to the point of becoming, quote, very alarming. That's the word this week from the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency talking to the Security Council. These military actions near such a large nuclear facility could lead to very serious consequences, said Rafael Grossi. At the meeting, which was requested by Russia, the meeting was marked by resounding calls to allow the agency's technical experts to visit the area amid mounting safety concerns. The IAEA chief said that the 5th of this month, the Zaporizhzhia plant, Europe's largest, was subjected to shelling, which caused several explosions near the electrical switchboard and a power shutdown. One reactor unit was disconnected from the electrical grid, triggering its emergency protection system and setting generators into operation to ensure power supply. There was also shelling at a nitrogen-oxygen station. Firefighters extinguished the blaze, but repairs must still be examined and evaluated. There's no immediate threat to nuclear safety as a result of the shelling or other military actions. However, quote, the head of the IAEA, this could change at any moment, unquote. Clean